You've got to look at more how you get more supply, and all of the changes, I think, with the government legislation are looking to restrict the supply of private landlords.
95% of tenancies work okay, fairly smoothly. It's the 5% that don't work to get the maximum publicity.
I think clear communication is really important for landlords. They don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the All Things Property podcast with me, Simon Bacon of Preferential Properties. Every week, Ian Sadler and I will delve into all things property. We'll guide you through with friendly, no-nonsense advice. Morning, Ian.
Morning, Simon. How are we?
I'm good, thank you very much.
Excellent.
So welcome back for another podcast. And today we're getting into something that shapes every renting experience, understanding what landlords and tenants actually want. Not the myths, not the stereotypes, but the real motivations on both sides. And I think when we understand these, the whole renting process becomes smoother for everyone involved. So Ian, in terms of tenants, what do you think it is that a tenant wants when they're looking to rent?
I think their prerequisite is affordability. They're looking for value for money, or something that they probably haven't had for the past 2 years. I think rents have shot up disproportionately to salaries. They're looking for good communication with the agent, good quick response time from the agent regarding maintenance issues. They want a clean property. They don't want to walk into a house where the oven's dirty and they have to clean it before they can live in it. And what most people want, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think they also want stability. They want to know they're not going to be forced to move. I think they also want respect from the landlord, respect from the letting agent, in terms of feeling like they're people and not just problems. And I guess ultimately, if you're going to sum it up, most tenants probably just want to live comfortably and predictably. It's probably that simple. But let's go back then. In terms of affordability, how do you think that can be achieved? What's affordable for from a tenant's perspective?
Well, I don't think current rents are affordable. It puts far too much pressure. A far greater percentage of income goes on rents than it ever used to.
And do you think tenants are concerned that rents just go up disproportionately each year? Or
they have to, they suck it up and they just learn to live with it, and it's they have no choice due to what the government are doing to the rental sector. All it's doing is putting rents up. Every action the government takes seems to put rents up, so they are conditioned to accepting that. They know there aren't enough properties around. If you have one property available, you'll get 30 or 40 inquiries for it. You could do 10, 20 viewings. So they're on the back foot.
That's the nub of it, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
That there isn't enough supply of rented properties in order to ease the rental issue.
So what can change that?
You've got to look at more how you get more supply, and all of the changes, I think, with the government legislation are looking to restrict the supply of private landlords, aren't they?
Yeah. They're looking for a utopian private rented sector that can never be achieved.
No, absolutely. I think the other issue that really affects tenants is, when they move in, I'm not saying all tenants, but a lot of tenants would like to know that they can be in for a good length of time to suit them.
Yeah, I think the level of insecurity now amongst tenants is as high as it's ever going to be. Whether this is a good time to talk about the Renters' Rights Bill, I don't know. It's going to give tenants far more security than they've ever had before. If you think about the old system, the Section 21, where a landlord's whim could evict a tenant with 2 months' notice.
Yeah, but the reality is the landlord can still do that. They can still say, I'm going to sell, and that's what landlords will sometimes do. So they still can give the tenant notice. The reality is, I don't know what your experience is, I haven't had landlords who've just gone, I want to get rid of a tenant. If that tenant's paying their rent, looking after the property, and everything is going well, I haven't got landlords that go, I don't want them anymore, I'd like to go and get somebody else. Have you?
No, I think the only reason well, the main reason for the Section 21 notice being served in the past has been rent arrears or problem tenants or a problem developing with a tenant or a tenancy that can't be resolved, and you have to resort to a Section 21.
Yeah, but I do, my personal view is I think that the abolition of Section 21 has been pushed by some of the government and organisations like Shelter for the wrong reasons. Because, I still maintain landlords don't get rid of good tenants. If you've got a bad tenant, a tenant who is not paying their rent, not because their circumstances have changed and they want to try and pay it, but you do get tenants who just, don't want to pay their rent. They may fall into, their circumstances may change, but they then don't pay the rent.
Yeah.
We got many?
No, I think the majority of tenancies, 99% of tenancies work okay.
The other thing I think is that, when we talk about well-maintained, safe, well-maintained homes, I should say, so no mould, no leaks, no electrical surprises. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the rules and regulations regarding electrics, EPCs, gas safeties are pretty much as strong as they need to be now. You can't afford to not do those if you're a landlord or an agent for fear of prosecution and large fines. So you're always going to get rogue landlords that don't do the necessary safety checks. That's just the way life is, isn't it?
Yeah. I think hopefully tenants will feel comforted if they are having a property that is let and managed by a reputable agent.
Yeah.
Because there's so much compliance, it is really important that tenants know what that compliance is. There's a balance there between, making sure that properties are well maintained, but also the tenant has a responsibility to make sure they maintain the property well. That old issue of mould, caused by condensation, that's probably one of the more argumentative aspects of a tenant-landlord relationship, whereby, mould is often caused by condensation, which is caused by lack of ventilation and just not the way that they live, rather than it being a fundamental problem with the house.
Can you expect every tenant to be fully aware of how to actually live in a property to maximise its efficiency?
No, you can't, but you can provide them with information. We provide every tenant when they move in, details of how to prevent mould, how to deal with condensation. When we do inspections, the number of, certainly in the winter, you go in and the windows are all steamed up. There's no ventilation. They've got stuff up against the walls. So it is very much a case of it's education. So the next part then is communication. And I think, again, tenants want good, clear communication from their letting agent, from the landlords. They know what's going on. They know when people are coming in. They know that if they have a repair to report or anything else, that there is a clear channel for doing such.
I think it's worth mentioning at this stage that a fair amount of tenants go into tenancies with preconceptions about how they're going to be treated during that tenancy, the response times, lack of communication. 95% of tenancies work okay, fairly smoothly. It's the 5% that don't work to get the maximum publicity. You don't hear about the 95% of tenancies that work fine. It's always the Tenants from Hell episodes on Channel 4 that get publicity and discolour the whole scene. And if you can break down those misconceptions or preconceptions, then you'll get on a lot better.
Well, that comes down to respect, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If all sides have a respect for each other, then, ultimately, I think, the whole tenancy process works a lot better. Okay, so I think we've probably summed up what it is that tenants are wanting. What do you think it is that landlords want?
Ideally, they want to hand their property over to the agent, leave everything to him, and just check their bank accounts to see the rents going in every month. And if they hear nothing during a tenancy apart from maybe inspection reports, then they'd be perfectly happy. They want every aspect covered by the agent.
Yeah.
It's fair enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not all landlords use agents. I think from a landlord's perspective, my thoughts probably would be that what landlords are looking for almost comes down to risk management. They want reliable rent payments. They want, utopia of tenants who care for the property as if it was their own. They probably want low vacancies. They want low conflict, i.e., not to have, many issues arising. And also they probably want to make sure legal compliance. And I think that it's really interesting that, when the issue with Rachel Reeves and her licensing issue came to the fore, the volume of inquiries I had from landlords over the next 2 days, just saying to me, do I need a license? Have you got this covered? And it was reassuring to be able to write back to them saying, no, you don't need one. This is why you don't need one. So I think that really brought to the forefront for me the issue that, compliance is really important for landlords in terms of...
It's the most important thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what does a reliable rent payment look like for landlords, would you say?
A reliable rent payment?
Yeah.
Regular
Same every day or same every month or,
Oh, I see, from a point of view of deductions. Well, the natural reaction from a landlord is, what has the tenant done to break that? Why am I paying for that? It's not my fault. And you get some pragmatic landlords that accept day-to-day maintenance. But I think the starting point would be that they're surprised and disappointed whenever a maintenance issue crops up. New boiler, for example, is they don't make the lot they used to, and they don't last as long as they used to. So £2,500 to replace a boiler is a significant amount.
No, absolutely. I also think that landlords, if they're not going to get their rent on the day that they expect to get it, they want communication. And they want to know perhaps why it's not come in. I think most landlords are receptive to a phone call that says your rent's going to be late this month by a couple of days. The tenant's been in touch to say, they've had a problem with their standing order, or they've had this, or they've had that. So I think clear communication is really important for landlords. They don't want to be left in the dark, especially when it comes to their monthly rent payment, because obviously from a mortgage perspective, if they've got a mortgage payment going out and the rent isn't going to hit in time, they do need to be able to understand and deal with that. I think the other issue is around vacancy. Landlords obviously get disappointed when tenants move out, because for them it often means, void, lack of rent. Are they going to have to do some work at the property? So it is very much in a landlord's interest to, ensure that try and keep a tenant in a property for as long as possible, which does go against that issue around Section 21s where, there's the myth that landlords just want, happy just to issue Section 21s and get tenants out. Actually, that's not what landlords want. They want low vacancy rates.
I don't think the Section 21 was perhaps overused. It's just that the landlords felt they wanted to be able to use it if they could do. So
a safety net for them.
Yeah, that's perfect safety net. Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of conflict, I also think, landlords, I'm sure that many landlords have their properties managed because they don't want the conflict of the issues. If a tenant is unhappy, rather, they don't want to be the person that has to deal with that. They want, the third party, the letting agent, to step in and deal with those issues.
Nobody likes confrontation and arguments, do they?
No.
Really, and people are too ready to launch into an argument nowadays. But no, it's not my most favourite part of the job, I have to say.
So for me, when you really think about it, tenants and landlords ought to be, and I think on the whole are generally aligned in what they're looking for. They're looking for, both tenants and landlords are looking for, realistic rents that comes in regularly each month. They want to know that the tenant's looking after the property, and the tenant wants to know that the landlord is also looking after the property. They both want good communication, and they both want stability. So for me, it's about landlords and tenants, despite being on opposite sides sometimes is how it feels, both want exactly the same thing. Ultimately, low stress, long-term, predictable tenancy. And if everybody understands that, I think that's when things start to change. And if you would like to talk to us about your property needs, or want a valuation, or want to talk about renting your property out, please give us a call. Thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the All Things Property podcast. If you found this episode useful, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. These things really help us reach the people who need to hear this advice. See you next week.